I'm Rachel, and I discovered my sister had stolen $47,000 from our mother's account exactly 12 hours before Mom was officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. What I thought was a routine doctor's appointment became the moment everything I believed about family crumbled before my eyes. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. While I was holding Mom's hand as she received devastating news about her failing memory, my sister was already 3 states away, having vanished with her life savings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Cedar Falls, Minnesota, our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. Mom worked as the head librarian at the public library for 32 years, a position she held with quiet dignity and unwavering dedication. Dad had been a high school chemistry teacher until his sudden heart attack when I was 23 and my sister Vanessa was 21. After his death, Mom never remarried, pouring all her energy into her work and maintaining the beautiful Victorian house Dad had restored with his own hands. Vanessa and I couldn't have been more different if we'd tried. I followed a predictable path through life, graduated with a degree in social work, married my college sweetheart Kevin, had 2 children, and settled into a comfortable routine 30 minutes from Mom in neighboring Millfield. I chose stability over excitement, routine over adventure, and I'd never questioned whether that made me boring until much later. Kevin worked as an electrician for the county, and together we built a modest but happy life centered around our kids, soccer games, family barbecues, and Sunday dinners at Mom's house. Vanessa, on the other hand, was the family hurricane. Beautiful, charismatic, and utterly unpredictable, she'd blow into town with expensive clothes, dramatic stories about her latest boyfriend or business venture, and always needing something: money for a security deposit on a new apartment, a loan to fix her car, help with credit card debt that somehow kept accumulating despite her claims of landing lucrative jobs in various cities across the country. Mom never said no to Vanessa, not once in all the years I could remember. When Vanessa dropped out of college during her junior year to follow a musician to Los Angeles, Mom quietly paid off her remaining student loans. When Vanessa's catering business in Phoenix failed after 6 months, Mom wired her money for a fresh start in Denver. When Vanessa claimed she was getting married to a wonderful man she'd known for 3 weeks and needed funds for a wedding dress, Mom opened her checkbook without hesitation. I watched this pattern repeat itself for over a decade, each time feeling a growing knot of resentment in my stomach. Not because I wanted Mom's money. Kevin and I were doing fine financially, but because I could see what Vanessa's constant demands were doing to our mother. Mom worked extra shifts at the library to cover Vanessa's emergencies. She postponed her own dental work to send Vanessa money for rent. She drove her old Honda Civic for 12 years, because every time she saved enough for a new car, Vanessa would call with another crisis. What made it worse was how Vanessa manipulated the situation. She had this way of making her requests sound reasonable, even noble. She wasn't asking for handouts. She was starting a business that would make her independent. She wasn't being irresponsible. She was in love and taking a chance on happiness. She wasn't using Mom. She was sharing her life with the one person who truly understood her dreams. During family gatherings, which became increasingly rare as Vanessa's visits grew more sporadic, she would regale us with stories of her adventures. She'd lived in 15 different cities in the past 10 years, worked jobs ranging from personal assistant to a semi-famous actor to managing a yoga studio in Sedona. She spoke 3 languages poorly, but confidently, had dated a minor league baseball player and claimed to have once been an extra in a commercial that aired during the Super Bowl. Kevin would listen politely, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. Our kids, Emma and Tyler, were fascinated by their glamorous aunt who brought them exotic presents from her travels and told them stories about places they'd only seen in movies. She was the cool aunt who lived the exciting life their boring parents had never dared to pursue. Meanwhile, I was the daughter who showed up. Every week, I drove to Mom's house to help with grocery shopping, yard work, and the small maintenance tasks that became harder for her as she aged. I noticed when she started forgetting appointments or repeating herself in conversations. I was the one who gently suggested she stop driving at night after she got confused coming home from the pharmacy. I organized her medications, updated her address book, and sat with her during doctor visits. Vanessa would call sporadically, usually when she needed something, but sometimes just to chat. These conversations always left Mom glowing with happiness. She would repeat every detail of their talk to me, as if I needed to understand how wonderful and successful Vanessa was becoming. The yoga studio was doing amazingly well. The new boyfriend was probably the one. The apartment in Santa Fe had the most beautiful mountain views. I developed a skill for listening to these updates with a neutral expression, while internally calculating how long it would be before the next crisis call. The pattern was always the same: 3 to 6 months of exciting updates followed by a tearful phone call about circumstances beyond Vanessa's control. The yoga studio owner was embezzling money, the wonderful boyfriend turned out to be married, the landlord was illegally trying to evict her. Kevin often asked why I didn't say something to Mom about the pattern. Why didn't I point out that Vanessa was 34 years old and should be managing her own life? Why didn't I suggest that constantly bailing her out wasn't actually helping her grow up? But I knew Mom wouldn't listen. Vanessa was her baby, the daughter who needed protecting. I was the strong, capable one who didn't need anything from anyone. This dynamic became more pronounced after Mom's 65th birthday. She retired from the library with a modest pension and her savings, looking forward to finally having time for the garden she'd always wanted to expand and the travel she'd postponed for years. She talked about visiting the national parks Dad had always wanted to see, maybe taking a cruise to Alaska, or even flying to visit Vanessa wherever she happened to be living. But retirement didn't bring the freedom Mom had expected. Within months, the requests from Vanessa intensified. Without the structure of full-time work, Mom seemed to spend more time worrying about her younger daughter's latest predicament. The phone calls became longer and more frequent. Mom would hang up from these conversations looking drained, then immediately begin calculating how much she could afford to send. I tried to broach the subject delicately during one of our weekly grocery trips. We were in the cereal aisle of the local supermarket when I noticed Mom had put the same box of oatmeal in the cart twice. When I pointed it out, she laughed it off as distraction, mentioning that Vanessa had called that morning with news about a potential business opportunity in Portland. "She's thinking about opening a boutique," Mom said, her eyes bright with vicarious excitement. "She has such a good eye for fashion, and Portland seems like the perfect market for unique, artistic clothing." I knew better than to ask where the startup money would come from. Instead, I asked if Vanessa had any experience in retail or business management. Mom's face tightened slightly, the way it always did when she sensed criticism of her younger daughter. "She's smart and adaptable," Mom said firmly. "She just needs someone to believe in her potential." That conversation haunted me for weeks. It wasn't just the
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
familiar pattern of Vanessa's grandiose plans requiring Mom's financial support. It was something else I'd noticed. Small things that individually seemed insignificant, but together formed a troubling picture. Mom had started writing things down more frequently, referring to lists for tasks she'd performed automatically for decades. She'd called me twice in 1 week to ask the same question about Emma's soccer schedule. She'd gotten confused about which day was which during a recent visit. I mentioned these observations to Kevin one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. He listened thoughtfully while scraping plates, then suggested that normal aging could explain everything I'd noticed. People become more forgetful as they get older. The transition to retirement was probably more disorienting than Mom had expected. Maybe the stress of constantly worrying about Vanessa was affecting her concentration. His explanations made sense, and I wanted to believe them. The alternative, that something might be seriously wrong with Mom's cognitive health, was too frightening to consider fully. So I filed away my concerns and focused on being more attentive during our weekly visits, telling myself I was just being overly protective. Spring arrived early that year, and Mom threw herself into her garden with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. She spent hours planning flower beds, researching companion planting techniques, and ordering seeds from catalogs that arrived in thick stacks throughout March. The physical activity and creative focus seemed to energize her, and my worries began to fade. Vanessa called in April with exciting news about her latest venture. She'd connected with a group of artisans in Portland, who were looking for someone to help market their handmade jewelry and pottery online. It was the perfect combination of her social skills and her eye for beautiful things. She just needed some initial investment to build a website, rent studio space, and cover living expenses while the business got established. The amount she requested was larger than usual, $15,000. Mom didn't have that much readily available in her checking account, but she had a certificate of deposit that would mature in 6 months. She could break it early, though there would be penalties for early withdrawal. When she called to discuss this with me, I could hear the conflict in her voice. "It really does sound like a legitimate opportunity this time," Mom said, though she'd said similar things about Vanessa's previous ventures. She's never asked for quite this much before, but she's also never had such a concrete business plan. I wanted to ask what had happened to the yoga studio in Santa Fe, or the catering business in Phoenix, or any of the other opportunities that had required Mom's financial support over the years. Instead, I asked if she'd seen this business plan, if she'd spoken to any of Vanessa's potential partners, if there was any way to verify the legitimacy of the opportunity. Mom's silence stretched long enough that I worried we'd lost connection. Finally, she said quietly, "I know you think I'm being foolish, but she's my daughter, Rachel. If I don't help her, who will?" The conversation ended without resolution, but I could tell Mom had already made up her mind. Sure enough, she called 2 days later to let me know she'd broken the CD and wired the money to Vanessa. When I asked if she'd at least kept some documentation about the business arrangement, Mom said Vanessa preferred to keep things simple between family members. A handshake deal based on love and trust. 3 months later, Vanessa called in tears. The Portland venture had fallen apart due to creative differences with her partners. She'd discovered they were using inferior materials and misrepresenting their products to customers. As the person responsible for marketing, she couldn't ethically continue promoting items she didn't believe in. She'd had to quit on principle, leaving her stranded in a city where she knew no one and had no income. Mom immediately began planning another rescue operation. This time, Vanessa needed money to break her lease, cover moving expenses, and establish herself somewhere new. She was thinking about Phoenix again. She still had connections there, and the cost of living was more reasonable than Portland. I drove to Mom's house that evening, ostensibly to help her transplant some seedlings, but really to talk about this latest crisis. I found her in the kitchen, surrounded by bank statements and checkbook registers, trying to calculate how much she could afford to send. "She's been through so much disappointment," Mom said without looking up from her papers. "Those people in Portland took advantage of her good nature. She trusted them, and they betrayed that trust." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, where we'd eaten countless family dinners, where she'd helped me with homework throughout high school, where we'd addressed wedding invitations and birth announcements and sympathy cards. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows Dad had installed himself, illuminating the fine lines around Mom's eyes and the slight tremor in her hands as she wrote. "Mom," I said gently, "what if instead of sending money you invited Vanessa to come home for a while? She could stay in her old room, help you with the garden, maybe look for work locally while she figures out her next step." Mom's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part surprise, part consideration, part something that might have been fear. "She wouldn't want to come back here," Mom said finally. "There's nothing for someone like Vanessa in Cedar Falls. She needs to be in a city where she can use her talents, meet people who understand her dreams. But maybe what she needs is some stability," I pressed. "Time to really think about what she wants instead of jumping from one opportunity to another." Mom shook her head slowly. "You don't understand her the way I do. Vanessa has always been different, special. She needs room to grow, to explore, to become who she's meant to be. If I bring her back here, I'll be clipping her wings." That night, I lay awake thinking about wings and cages, about protection and enabling, about the different ways we love people and the different ways that love can go wrong. I thought about my own children and how I would want to help them if they were struggling. But I also thought about teaching them resilience, accountability, and the difference between temporary help and permanent dependence. By morning, Mom had decided to send Vanessa $3,500, enough to break her lease, hire movers, and establish herself in Phoenix with a security deposit and first month's rent. She asked me not to mention the specific amount to Kevin, knowing he would disapprove of the pattern she'd established. Summer passed quietly. Vanessa settled into a new apartment in Scottsdale and found work at an upscale spa, doing client relations and marketing their wellness programs. For once, she seemed genuinely happy and stable. Her calls to Mom were filled with enthusiasm about her colleagues, her clients, and the beautiful desert landscape. She was taking yoga classes, eating healthily, and dating a massage therapist who shared her interest in holistic wellness. Mom bloomed during this period of positive news. Her garden flourished under her attentive care, producing an abundance of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs that she shared generously with neighbors and family. She joined a book club at the library and began volunteering at the local food bank. When Kevin and I brought the kids for Sunday dinner, Mom would regale us with stories from Vanessa's calls, describing her new life with evident pride and relief. I allowed myself to hope that maybe this time was different. Maybe Vanessa had finally found her path, a place where her talents were appreciated and her impulsive nature could be channeled productively. Maybe the cycle of crisis and rescue was finally broken. That hope lasted until October, when Vanessa called with devastating news. She'd been diagnosed with a serious health condition, requiring immediate surgery and extended recovery time. The details were vague, something gynecological that she preferred not to discuss in detail, but that would require her to take significant time off work. Her insurance would cover most of the medical expenses, but she'd lose her income during recovery and might not be able to return to her current position afterward. Mom immediately offered to fly to Phoenix to help with her recovery, but Vanessa insisted she didn't want anyone to see her in such a vulnerable state. She just needed financial support to cover living expenses while she healed and figured out her next steps. The amount she requested was staggering, $20,000. Mom didn't have $20,000 readily available without touching her retirement investments. She called me the day after speaking with Vanessa, her voice shaky with worry and uncertainty. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I can't let her face this alone, but I don't have that kind of money sitting in my checking account." I asked the questions that needed asking. Had she spoken to any of Vanessa's doctors? Did she have documentation of the diagnosis? Was there any way to verify the medical necessity of such a large amount? Could Vanessa apply for temporary disability benefits or ask her employer about medical leave policies? Each question seemed to upset Mom more. She couldn't understand why I was treating Vanessa's crisis like some kind of fraud investigation, instead of offering immediate support and sympathy. This was her daughter facing a serious health scare, possibly alone in a city where she had no family. How could money matter more than Vanessa's well-being? The conversation ended badly, with Mom accusing me of being jealous of the attention Vanessa received and me suggesting that maybe enabling Vanessa's dependence wasn't actually helping her. We didn't speak for 3 days, the longest silence between us in years. When Mom finally called back, it was to inform me that she'd decided to withdraw money from her retirement account to help Vanessa through this crisis. She'd already spoken to her financial advisor about the tax implications and early withdrawal penalties. It would significantly impact her long-term financial security, but family came first. I drove to her house that evening, bringing takeout from her favorite Chinese restaurant as a peace offering. We ate in relative silence, both of us avoiding the topic that had driven us apart. Afterwards, as I helped clear the dishes, Mom suddenly started crying. "I'm scared," she whispered, leaning against the kitchen counter with her shoulders shaking. "I'm scared about Vanessa being sick and alone. I'm scared about spending so much money. I'm scared that you think I'm a foolish old woman who can't see when she's being taken advantage of." I wrapped my arms around her, feeling how fragile she'd become in recent months. "I don't think you're foolish," I said softly. "I think you're a mother who loves her daughter. I just worry about both of you." That night, I helped Mom navigate the process of withdrawing funds from her retirement account. The paperwork was complex, requiring multiple signatures and waiting periods designed to discourage hasty decisions. As we worked through the forms together, I noticed things that troubled me. Mom had difficulty remembering her Social Security number, something she'd known by heart her entire adult life. She needed to check her driver's license twice to confirm her address. She seemed confused by financial terms that should have been familiar after decades of managing her own accounts. I suggested we make an appointment with her doctor for a general checkup, mentioning that major financial decisions could be stressful and it might be good to make sure she was taking care of her health during this difficult time. Mom agreed readily, which surprised me. In the past, she'd always been reluctant to spend money on medical appointments unless something was obviously wrong. The appointment was scheduled for the following Thursday. I offered to drive her, and again, she accepted without the independence-asserting protest I would have expected. We spent the interim days working in her garden together, preparing the beds for winter and harvesting the last of the season's vegetables. The physical activity seemed to calm both of us, providing a peaceful rhythm after weeks of tension. On Tuesday evening, Mom called to let me know she'd received confirmation that the money transfer to Vanessa had gone through successfully. Vanessa was scheduled for surgery the following week and had expressed tremendous gratitude for Mom's support. She promised to stay in close contact throughout her recovery and to pay back every penny as soon as she was able to return to work. Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. Something nagged at me about the entire situation. Not just Vanessa's latest crisis, but the accumulation of small changes I'd noticed in Mom over recent months. The forgetfulness, the confusion with familiar tasks, the willingness to make major financial decisions without her usual careful deliberation. I found myself Googling symptoms of various conditions, from depression to early-stage dementia, trying to understand what might explain the changes I'd observed. Thursday morning dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of brilliant autumn light that made Minnesota's landscape look like a painting. I picked up Mom for her doctor's appointment, stopping to buy her favorite cinnamon rolls from the bakery she'd frequented for 30 years. She seemed unusually quiet during the drive, staring out the window at the familiar scenery with an expression I couldn't interpret. In the doctor's waiting room, I watched Mom struggle to fill out forms that should have been routine. She couldn't remember the exact dates of her last mammogram or colonoscopy, information she'd always tracked meticulously in a small calendar she kept specifically for medical appointments. She asked me twice what year it was, then laughed nervously when I told her, saying she'd always been terrible with dates. When Dr. Martinez called us back to the examination room, Mom seemed to shrink into herself. She answered his questions about her general health in monosyllables, lacking the chatty warmth that had characterized their relationship for over a decade. When he asked about any changes in memory or cognitive function, she glanced at me nervously before insisting everything was fine. I'd known Dr. Martinez since he'd taken over Mom's care 5 years earlier, and I could see the careful attention he was paying to her responses. When he asked if he could speak with me privately for a moment, Mom agreed with surprising readily. That compliance, more than anything else, confirmed my growing fears about her condition. In the hallway outside the examination room, Dr. Martinez spoke quietly about concerns he'd developed during the appointment. Mom's responses had been slower than normal, and she'd shown some confusion about basic temporal orientation. Combined with my observations about recent behavioral changes, he thought it would be wise to schedule some cognitive testing. The tests could be arranged for the following week, but Dr. Martinez wanted to stress that many conditions could explain what we were observing: depression, medication side effects, vitamin deficiencies, thyroid problems. Any number of treatable conditions could cause temporary cognitive difficulties. He didn't want us to assume the worst before gathering more information. But as we drove home from the appointment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late for some things. If Mom was developing dementia, how long had it been affecting her judgment? How many of Vanessa's requests had been processed by a mind that was already beginning to fail? How much of Mom's retirement security had been compromised during a period when she wasn't fully capable of making sound financial decisions? That evening, I called Kevin from Mom's kitchen while she napped in her favorite chair. I explained about the doctor's visit, the upcoming tests, and my growing concerns about the timing of Vanessa's latest financial request. Kevin listened without interrupting, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you think Vanessa knows?" he said quietly. "About your mom's condition, I mean. Do you think she's taking advantage of someone who isn't fully capable of protecting herself anymore?" I stared out the kitchen window at the garden Mom and I had worked in just days earlier, now looking stark and empty in the fading light. The question Kevin had asked was the one I'd been circling around for weeks without letting myself fully confront it. Was my sister deliberately exploiting our mother's declining cognitive abilities? Or was she simply continuing a pattern that had been established long before any symptoms appeared? Either possibility was devastating in its own way. If Vanessa knew Mom was becoming cognitively impaired and continued making financial demands, it constituted a form of elder abuse. If she didn't know, it meant the person who claimed to love Mom most was completely oblivious to her deteriorating condition. I didn't have an answer for Kevin's question that night, but I promised myself I would find one. The cognitive testing scheduled for the following week would provide clarity about Mom's condition. Once I understood what we were dealing with medically, I could begin to address the financial and family complications that had become intertwined with her health. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, I thought about all the decisions that had led us to this moment. Every time I'd bitten my tongue instead of confronting Vanessa's financial demands. Every time I'd chosen peace over truth. Every time I'd enabled Mom's enabling by failing to speak up about the pattern I could see so clearly. Tomorrow, I would begin making different choices. I would start asking harder questions and demanding better answers. I would stop protecting everyone's feelings at the expense of Mom's well-being and financial security. But tonight, I grieved for the innocent days when I believed family meant people who would always protect each other from harm, rather than sometimes being the source of the greatest harm of all. Friday morning arrived with an unseasonable warmth that felt almost mocking given the storm brewing in our family. I woke early, unable to shake the conversation with Kevin from the night before. His question about whether Vanessa knew about Mom's condition had lodged itself in my mind like a splinter, painful and impossible to ignore. I decided to drive to Mom's house earlier than usual, hoping to spend some quiet time with her before she became too tired. I found her in the kitchen still wearing her bathrobe at nearly 10 in the morning. This was unusual for someone who had always been dressed and ready by 7, even in retirement. She was standing at the counter with a confused expression, holding an empty coffee mug and staring at the coffee maker as if she couldn't remember how to operate it. "Good morning, Mom," I said gently, not wanting to startle her. "Would you like me to make some coffee?" She turned toward me with visible relief flooding her features. "Oh, Rachel, thank goodness you're here. I was trying to make coffee, but this machine seems so complicated today. I don't know what's wrong with me." The coffee maker was the same one she'd used for 8 years, a simple model with clearly marked buttons. I helped her through the process, noting how she watched intently as if learning something entirely new. While the coffee brewed, I suggested we sit at the kitchen table and plan our day together. "I thought we might go through some of Dad's old papers in the attic," I said, though my real motivation was to check on her important documents. "We keep talking about organizing them, and it's such a beautiful day for working indoors." Mom agreed enthusiastically, seeming grateful for direction and purpose. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I noticed she gripped the banister more tightly than necessary and took each step deliberately, as if unsure of her footing. The woman who had bounded up these stairs, carrying laundry baskets and Christmas decorations for decades now, moved like someone navigating unfamiliar terrain. The attic was dusty and warm, filled with the accumulated memories of 40 years in the same house. Dad's filing cabinet sat in the corner, stuffed with tax returns, insurance policies, and warranty information for appliances we'd replaced years ago. Mom settled into Dad's old desk chair while I pulled boxes down from the shelves, ostensibly looking for documents to organize but really observing her behavior. As we worked through the papers, I began asking casual questions about her finances. Did she remember the name of her financial advisor? Could she recall when she'd last reviewed her investment accounts? Did she have a system for organizing her bank statements? Each question revealed another gap in her knowledge or memory. She couldn't remember her advisor's name without checking her address book. She hadn't looked at her investment statements in months, maybe longer. Her bank statements were stuffed in a kitchen drawer, unopened and unexamined. "You know, honey," Mom said suddenly, looking up from a stack of Dad's old teaching materials, "I've been thinking about asking you to help me with my finances. Everything seems so complicated now, and I worry I'm making mistakes." This admission felt like both a gift and a devastating confirmation of my fears. Mom had always been fiercely independent about money, insisting on managing her own accounts even when Dad offered to take over the bookkeeping. For her to acknowledge that she needed help meant the problem was more serious than I'd realized. "Of course I'll help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We could start by going through your bank statements together, maybe this afternoon. Would that be helpful?" She nodded eagerly, then returned to sorting through Dad's papers with renewed focus. We spent the next hour in comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts, while handling the remnants of a life well lived. I found myself wondering what future sorting session would reveal about Mom's life, what confusion and chaos might be left behind if her condition continued to deteriorate. Around noon, we took a break for lunch. Mom seemed tired from the morning's activities, moving slowly as she prepared sandwiches with ingredients I'd brought the day before. As we ate, she told me about a strange phone call she'd received earlier in the week. "Someone from the bank called asking about a large withdrawal," she said, taking small bites of her turkey sandwich. "They wanted to confirm it was really me making the request." I told them of course it was me, but I couldn't remember exactly what the withdrawal was for. Everything runs together sometimes. My sandwich suddenly tasted like cardboard. "What kind of withdrawal, Mom? Do you remember how much?" She frowned, pressing her fingers to her temples as if trying to squeeze out a memory. "I think it was several $1,000s. Maybe for Vanessa's medical expenses? Or was that a different transaction? I honestly can't keep track anymore." After lunch, I suggested we gather her financial documents so I could help her organize them. Mom led me to the kitchen drawer where she'd been storing her bank statements, credit card bills, and investment reports. The drawer was stuffed with unopened envelopes, some dating back several months. As I pulled out handfuls of mail, I felt my stomach tighten with apprehension. We settled at the dining room table with the accumulated paperwork spread between us. I started with the most recent bank statement, hoping to understand her current financial situation before delving into older records. What I found made my hands shake as I held the paper. According to the statement dated just 5 days earlier, Mom's checking account had a balance of $417. This was the account that typically maintained a balance of $8,000 to $10,000 to cover her monthly expenses. More troubling were the withdrawal entries scattered throughout the month. 3 separate transfers totaling $47,000 had been made to an account I didn't recognize. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "can you help me understand these withdrawals? This looks like a lot of money going out of your account." She leaned over to look at the statement, squinting at the numbers as if they were written in a foreign language. "I'm not sure," she said finally. "Could those be for Vanessa's surgery? She needed help with her medical bills." I pulled out my phone and called the bank's customer service line, putting the call on speaker so Mom could participate in the conversation. After navigating through several automated menus, I reached a representative who confirmed that 3 electronic transfers had been initiated from Mom's account over the past month. The largest single transfer, for $25,000, had been processed just 2 days earlier. "The transfers were initiated through our online banking system," the representative explained. "They were sent to an account at Desert Community Bank in Phoenix, Arizona. The account holder's name is Vanessa Mitchell." Vanessa Mitchell. Not Vanessa Peterson, our family name, but Mitchell. I asked the representative to repeat the name, hoping I'd misheard. Mom sat beside me with a puzzled expression, apparently not understanding the significance of the different surname. After ending the call with the bank, I excused myself to the bathroom and immediately called Kevin. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, and when he answered, the words tumbled out in a rush. "She took $47,000. I whispered into the phone. "Vanessa cleaned out Mom's checking account. The bank says the transfers went to an account under the name Vanessa Mitchell, not Peterson. Kevin, what if she's married? What if this whole medical emergency story is a lie?" Kevin's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the phone. "Are you sure? Could there be some other explanation?" I explained about the bank statement, the electronic transfers, and Mom's obvious confusion about the transactions. As I spoke, the pieces of a horrible puzzle began falling into place. Vanessa's reluctance to provide specific details about her medical condition, her insistence that Mom not come to Phoenix to help with her recovery, the conveniently large amount of money needed right before Mom's cognitive testing. "You need to call the police," Kevin said firmly. "This sounds like elder abuse, Rachel. If your mom isn't mentally competent to make these kinds of financial decisions, then Vanessa is stealing from her." But was Mom mentally incompetent? The cognitive testing wasn't scheduled until Monday, and we wouldn't have results for several days after that. Without a formal diagnosis, would the police take our concerns seriously? And what if I was wrong about everything? What if Vanessa really was sick and needed the money, and I was about to destroy our family over my own paranoid suspicions? I returned to the dining room where Mom was slowly working her way through the stack of unopened mail. She'd managed to organize the envelopes into rough piles, bills in one stack, investment statements in another, junk mail in a third. The simple task that should have taken 15 minutes had consumed most of an hour, but she seemed proud of her progress. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, settling back into my chair. She held up a thick envelope from her investment company. "This one looks important, but I haven't opened it yet. I keep meaning to go through all of this, but it feels so overwhelming." I helped her open the envelope, revealing a quarterly statement for her retirement accounts. The numbers made my heart race. Her IRA balance was significantly lower than it should have been, showing a large withdrawal from the previous month. Combined with the checking account transfers, Vanessa had accessed nearly $60,000 of Mom's money in just 6 weeks. As gently as possible, I asked Mom if she remembered authorizing this IRA withdrawal. She stared at the paper for a long time, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I think I remember something about penalties," she said slowly. "Someone explained that I would have to pay extra fees to take money out early, but I can't remember why I needed it. Was it for home repairs? Or did Vanessa need help with something?" The casual uncertainty in her voice was heartbreaking. This woman, who had managed complex library budgets and balanced her checkbook to the penny every month, couldn't remember withdrawing a life-changing amount of money just weeks earlier. Whether the cause was Alzheimer's, depression, or some other condition, it was clear that she was no longer capable of protecting herself from financial exploitation. I spent the rest of the afternoon helping Mom organize her financial documents while trying to piece together the timeline of Vanessa's requests. Based on the bank records and Mom's fragmentary memories, it appeared that the financial demands had escalated significantly over the past few months, coinciding with Mom's increasing cognitive difficulties. As the sun began to set, I helped Mom prepare a simple dinner, noting how she needed step-by-step guidance for tasks she'd performed automatically for decades. While she napped in her chair after eating, I used her computer to access her online banking account, hoping to find more information about the transfers to Vanessa. The electronic banking records revealed details that made my blood run cold. The transfers hadn't been initiated from Mom's usual computer or during her typical banking hours. Instead, they'd been processed late at night, or very early in the morning, times when Mom was almost certainly asleep. The computer's browser history showed multiple visits to the bank's website during these unusual hours, along with Google searches for power of attorney, online banking transfer limits, and elderly financial abuse laws. Someone had been researching how to access Mom's accounts and how much money could be transferred without triggering additional security measures. Someone had been planning this systematic theft with careful attention to legal and practical obstacles. The searches had been conducted over several weeks, suggesting a deliberate campaign rather than a desperate response to a medical emergency. I printed out the banking records and browser history, my hands shaking as I realized the extent of what appeared to be happening. This wasn't just a pattern of family financial enabling that had gotten out of hand. This looked like calculated elder abuse, executed by someone who understood exactly how vulnerable Mom had become. By evening, I'd documented $62,000 in transfers and withdrawals over the past 2 months, all connected to requests from Vanessa. The money represented the vast majority of Mom's liquid assets, funds she'd carefully saved for her retirement and any future care needs. If my suspicions were correct, Vanessa had systematically stripped away Mom's financial security, while her cognitive abilities were declining. I decided to spend the night at Mom's house, telling her I wanted to keep her company but really wanting to monitor any unusual activity. We watched her favorite television programs together, and I helped her with her evening routine, noting how she needed reminders for basic tasks like taking her medications and locking the doors. Around 10 o'clock, as Mom was getting ready for bed, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Vanessa's number, and Mom answered with obvious pleasure at hearing from her younger daughter. I listened from the kitchen as Mom described her day in the cheerful but repetitive way that had become her new normal. "Rachel came to visit today," Mom said. "We organized some papers in the attic and looked at bank statements. She's such a good daughter, always helping me with things I can't manage anymore." There was a long pause before Vanessa responded, and when she did, her voice carried an edge I could hear even from the next room. "What kind of bank statements, Mom? Did you show Rachel anything about our arrangement?" Our arrangement. The phrase made my stomach lurch. What kind of arrangement existed between a mother with declining cognitive abilities and a daughter who had apparently been systematically accessing her finances? "I don't remember exactly," Mom said, sounding confused and slightly distressed. "We looked at lots of papers. Rachel helped me understand some things that seemed complicated." Another pause, then Vanessa's voice became soothing and conspiratorial. "Mom, you know how Rachel can be sometimes. She worries too much about money and doesn't understand that families help each other. If she asks any questions about the money I borrowed, just remember that it's nobody's business but ours, okay?" I felt sick listening to my sister manipulate our confused mother into secrecy. She was coaching Mom to hide information from me, exploiting her cognitive difficulties to maintain access to her finances. This was exactly the kind of isolation and manipulation that characterized elder abuse cases I'd read about in my social work training. After Mom hung up the phone, she seemed agitated and confused. She came into the kitchen where I was pretending to clean dishes, her expression troubled. "Rachel, honey, did we do anything wrong today?" Vanessa seemed upset that we looked at bank papers together. The plaintive uncertainty in her voice broke my heart. She was asking me to help her understand reality because her own perceptions had become unreliable. She was depending on me to navigate a situation she couldn't fully comprehend. "We didn't do anything wrong, Mom," I said firmly. "Looking at your own financial records is completely normal and appropriate. No one should tell you to keep secrets about your own money." She nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion lingering in her eyes. Vanessa had planted seeds of doubt and secrecy that would continue to grow in Mom's compromised mind. Even after I left, Mom would carry the vague sense that she was supposed to hide something from me, though she might not remember exactly what or why. That night, I lay awake in Dad's old home office, now Mom's guest room, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide what to do next. The evidence strongly suggested that Vanessa had been financially exploiting Mom, possibly for months. But confronting Vanessa directly might cause her to disappear with the money she'd already taken, and without a formal diagnosis of Mom's cognitive impairment, law enforcement might be reluctant to intervene. I needed to protect Mom from further financial damage while gathering enough evidence to potentially recover what had already been taken. I needed to understand the full scope of what had happened without alerting Vanessa that her activities had been discovered. Most importantly, I needed to do all of this while managing Mom's growing confusion and my own emotional devastation at discovering the extent of my sister's betrayal. Saturday morning brought new complications. Mom woke up disoriented and anxious, apparently still troubled by Vanessa's phone call from the night before. She asked me repeatedly whether we were in trouble for looking at bank statements, each time forgetting my previous reassurances within minutes. As I helped her with breakfast, I noticed she was having difficulty with basic sequencing tasks. She couldn't remember the order of steps needed to make toast, standing at the counter with bread and butter but unable to figure out what came next. When I gently guided her through the process, she became frustrated with herself, apologizing for being so stupid lately. "You're not stupid, Mom," I said, helping her spread butter on the warm toast. "Sometimes our brains need extra help figuring things out. That's why I'm here." Around noon, Kevin arrived with our children, planning to spend the afternoon with Mom, while I handled some errands. Emma and Tyler, now 13 and 11, immediately noticed their grandmother's changed behavior. She repeated herself frequently during conversation and needed help finding her way around her own house. When Tyler asked her about a family vacation we'd taken the previous summer, she looked blank and confused, unable to remember the trip despite having talked about it enthusiastically just months earlier. I pulled Kevin aside and explained about Vanessa's phone call and Mom's increasing agitation. He agreed that we needed to move quickly to protect her from further exploitation while documenting everything that had already occurred. "I'm going to drive to the police station," I told him quietly. "I want to file a report about potential elder abuse, even if they can't act on it immediately. At least there will be an official record if things get worse." The Cedar Falls Police Department was housed in a modern building that always made me feel slightly intimidated, despite my professional background in social services. The desk sergeant listened politely as I explained my concerns about my sister's financial transactions with my cognitively impaired mother. He took notes and asked clarifying questions, but I could see skepticism in his expression. "Without a formal diagnosis of incapacity," he explained, "it's difficult to prove that your mother wasn't making these financial decisions willingly. Family financial disputes are civil matters unless we can demonstrate clear evidence of fraud or coercion." He suggested I consult with an elder law attorney who could advise me about guardianship proceedings and financial protections for vulnerable adults. He also recommended that I contact Adult Protective Services to report suspected elder abuse, even though their investigation would likely be limited without stronger evidence of cognitive impairment. I left the police station feeling frustrated, but not entirely discouraged. The sergeant had taken my report seriously and provided useful guidance about next steps. More importantly, there was now an official record of my concerns, dated before any formal diagnosis of Mom's condition. If legal proceedings became necessary later, this initial report could help establish a timeline of when problems were first identified. Sunday passed quietly. I stayed close to Mom, helping her with routine tasks while observing her capabilities and limitations. She was clearly struggling with short-term memory and executive functioning, but her long-term memories remained largely intact. She could tell detailed stories about her childhood or early years of marriage, but couldn't remember what she'd eaten for breakfast or whether she'd taken her morning medications. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of dread and relief. Today would bring Mom's cognitive testing appointment, which would finally provide professional assessment of her mental state. The results would either confirm my fears about her condition or reveal that her difficulties were caused by something treatable. Dr. Martinez had arranged for the testing to be conducted by Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuropsychologist who specialized in age-related cognitive changes. The appointment was scheduled for 2 hours, long enough for comprehensive evaluation but not so lengthy as to exhaust Mom's limited attention span. I picked up Mom early, hoping to give her time to settle in before the testing began. She seemed unusually quiet during the drive, occasionally asking where we were going despite my having explained multiple times. When I reminded her about the appointment, she would nod and smile, then ask the same question again 15 minutes later. The testing center was located in a medical complex on the outskirts of town, designed to be calming and non-threatening for anxious patients. Dr. Chen greeted us warmly, immediately putting Mom at ease with gentle conversation about the beautiful autumn weather and Mom's lovely garden. The testing itself took place in a comfortable room, furnished with a desk, comfortable chairs, and soft lighting. Dr. Chen explained that she would be asking Mom to complete various tasks designed to assess different aspects of cognitive function. Some would be easy, others more challenging, and Mom shouldn't worry if she couldn't answer every question correctly. I was allowed to stay in the room, but positioned where I couldn't see Mom's responses or provide any assistance. For 2 hours, I watched my mother struggle with tasks that would have been simple for her just a year earlier. She couldn't remember a list of 3 words after a 5-minute delay. She became confused when asked to draw a clock face with hands pointing to a specific time. She couldn't perform simple mathematical calculations that she'd done automatically while managing the library's budget. Most heartbreaking was watching her growing awareness of her own difficulties. As the testing progressed, Mom became increasingly frustrated with herself, apologizing repeatedly for her mistakes and asking if she was, quote, failing the test. Dr. Chen reassured her gently, but I could see the professional concern in her expression as she documented Mom's responses. When the testing concluded, Dr. Chen explained that she would need several days to score the results and prepare a comprehensive report. However, she could share some preliminary observations. Mom's long-term memory and general knowledge remained relatively intact, but she showed significant impairment in short-term memory executive functioning, and processing speed. These patterns were consistent with early-stage dementia, though additional testing might be needed to determine the specific type and progression rate. The good news, Dr. Chen said gently, is that we caught this relatively early. There are medications that can help slow the progression, and with proper support, many people with these conditions continue to live fulfilling lives for years. Mom nodded politely during this explanation, but I could tell she wasn't fully processing the implications of what she was hearing. She understood that something was wrong with her memory, but the concept of dementia or Alzheimer's disease remained abstract and distant. As we left the testing center, Mom seemed relieved that the difficult questions were over. She chatted cheerfully about Dr. Chen's kind manner and the comfortable furniture in the waiting room, apparently forgetting the struggles she'd experienced during the evaluation. I drove home in silence, processing the reality that my worst fears were being confirmed by professional assessment. That evening, after settling Mom at home with her dinner and television programs, I drove to my own house to update Kevin and begin planning our next steps. We needed to move quickly to protect Mom's remaining assets while working within the legal constraints of her diagnosed condition. Kevin had spent the afternoon researching elder law attorneys and adult protective services procedures. He'd also looked into the process for obtaining emergency guardianship if Mom was deemed legally incapacitated. The information was overwhelming but necessary for navigating the complex intersection of medical, legal, and financial issues we were facing. As we talked late into the evening, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief but chilling. "Stop interfering in family business or you'll regret it." I showed the message to Kevin, my hands trembling as I held the phone. Someone was monitoring our activities and felt threatened enough to send anonymous warnings. Given the timing and content, it was almost certainly connected to my investigation of Mom's financial situation. "That's it," Kevin said firmly. "Tomorrow morning, you're calling that elder law attorney and adult protective services. This has gone beyond family dysfunction into criminal territory. Your mom needs legal protection, and you need to document everything that's happened." I agreed, though part of me still hoped there was some innocent explanation for everything that had occurred. Maybe Vanessa really was sick and desperately needed money. Maybe the anonymous threat came from someone else entirely. Maybe Mom's condition wasn't as serious as the preliminary testing suggested. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the threatening text message on my phone, I knew I was grasping for false hope. The evidence was overwhelming and consistent. My sister had systematically exploited our cognitively impaired mother, stealing her life savings during the period when she was least able to protect herself. The anonymous threat suggested that Vanessa knew her activities had been discovered and was willing to intimidate me into silence. Tuesday morning would mark the beginning of a new phase in this nightmare. I would start the process of seeking legal protection for Mom while gathering evidence of the financial abuse she'd suffered. I would stop hoping for the best and start preparing for the worst. Most importantly, I would stop protecting Vanessa from the consequences of her choices and start protecting Mom from further victimization. The cognitive testing results would provide the medical foundation for legal intervention. Dr. Chen's preliminary assessment had already given me enough information to proceed with reporting elder abuse and exploring guardianship options. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be fighting this battle alone. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I thought about all the signs I'd missed or rationalized over the past months. The subtle changes in Mom's behavior that I'd attributed to normal aging. The escalating financial requests from Vanessa that I'd viewed as poor judgment, rather than calculated exploitation. The isolation and secrecy that had gradually developed around Mom's relationship with her younger daughter. Tomorrow I would begin the process of undoing the damage that had been done and preventing further harm. It wouldn't be easy, and it might permanently destroy what remained of our family relationships. But Mom deserved protection and justice, even if it came at the cost of everything I'd once believed about the people I loved most. Tuesday morning brought the official diagnosis that would change everything. Dr. Chen called at 8:30 with the formal results of Mom's cognitive testing. The comprehensive evaluation confirmed early-stage Alzheimer's disease with moderate impairment in executive functioning and financial decision-making capacity. The diagnosis was devastating but also provided the legal foundation I needed to protect Mom from further exploitation. Armed with this medical documentation, I immediately contacted Margaret Hoffman, the elder law attorney Kevin had researched. Her office could see me that afternoon, and she advised me to bring all financial records, the threatening text message, and any other evidence of suspected abuse. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had allies in this fight, rather than facing it alone. Margaret's office was located in a restored Victorian house that had been converted into a professional complex. The warm, residential atmosphere felt more welcoming than a typical law firm, which seemed appropriate given the personal nature of elder law issues. Margaret herself was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately inspired confidence. Elder financial abuse is more common than most people realize, she explained as we reviewed the documentation I'd brought. Adult children with substance abuse issues, gambling problems, or simply poor financial judgment often target aging parents who are becoming more vulnerable. The fact that your sister appears to have researched the legal aspects beforehand suggests this was premeditated rather than opportunistic. Margaret outlined several legal options available to us. We could file for emergency guardianship based on Mom's diagnosis, which would give me legal authority to protect her finances and make medical decisions. We could report the suspected theft to law enforcement with the medical evidence to support claims of financial incapacity. We could also initiate civil proceedings to recover the stolen funds, though that process could take months or years. The most important thing right now is stopping any additional theft, Margaret emphasized. Your mother's condition will only worsen over time, making her increasingly vulnerable to manipulation. We need to act quickly while she still has some cognitive capacity and before more damage is done. I authorized Margaret to begin emergency guardianship proceedings immediately. She would file the necessary paperwork that afternoon, and a court hearing would be scheduled within days. In the meantime, she advised me to contact Mom's bank and investment companies to alert them about her diagnosis and request additional security measures on her accounts. After leaving Margaret's office, I drove straight to First National Bank, where Mom had maintained accounts for over 20 years. The branch manager, Susan Walsh, had known our family since I was a teenager. When I explained about Mom's diagnosis and the suspicious financial activity, her professional demeanor immediately shifted to one of concern and protective determination. We've been implementing new protocols for protecting elderly customers, Susan explained as she pulled up Mom's account history on her computer. I wish we'd caught these unusual transactions earlier, but your sister had all the correct access information and knew your mother's personal details well enough to pass our security questions. Susan walked me through the process of placing fraud alerts on all of Mom's accounts. Any future transactions over $500 would require verification through multiple channels, including contact with me as Mom's designated representative. She also provided detailed printouts of all transactions over the past 6 months, highlighting the pattern of escalating withdrawals that coincided with Mom's cognitive decline. The bank records painted an even more disturbing picture than I'd initially realized. Vanessa had been accessing Mom's accounts systematically since early spring, starting with small transfers that gradually increased in frequency and amount. The pattern suggested careful testing of Mom's awareness and the bank's security measures before committing to larger thefts. Wednesday brought the court hearing for emergency guardianship. Mom and I arrived at the courthouse early, and I'd tried to prepare her for what would happen during the proceedings. However, her confusion about the purpose of our visit became apparent as soon as we entered the courtroom. "Why are we here again, honey?" she whispered as we took our seats. "Are we in some kind of trouble?" Judge Patricia Morrison was known for her expertise in elder law cases and her compassionate handling of family disputes. She reviewed Dr. Chen's medical report, the bank records, and Margaret's legal brief before asking to speak with Mom directly. The conversation was heartbreaking to witness. Judge Morrison asked Mom simple questions about her financial situation, her relationship with Vanessa, and her understanding of the money that had been transferred from her accounts. Mom's answers revealed the full extent of her confusion and vulnerability. "I know Vanessa needed help with something important," Mom said, her voice uncertain. "Medical bills, I think? Or maybe it was for a business opportunity. I can't quite remember the details, but I wanted to help my daughter." When Judge Morrison asked if Mom understood that nearly $70,000 had been taken from her accounts, Mom's face showed genuine shock. "That much money? That can't be right. I would never give away that much money. I need that for my retirement. The judge's expression grew increasingly grave as the conversation continued. Mom couldn't remember authorizing the transfers, couldn't explain why such large amounts would be necessary, and couldn't provide any documentation of legitimate business arrangements or medical expenses that would justify the transactions. Based on the medical evidence and testimony I've heard today, Judge Morrison announced, "I'm granting emergency guardianship to Rachel Peterson with immediate effect. This order gives you full authority to manage your mother's financial affairs and make medical decisions on her behalf. I'm also issuing a freeze on all accounts associated with the defendant, Vanessa Peterson, Mitchell, pending further investigation." The use of Vanessa's married name confirmed my suspicions that she'd been living under false pretenses. Margaret had discovered through her investigation that Vanessa had indeed married someone named David Mitchell in Las Vegas 6 months earlier, but had never mentioned this marriage to our family. The secrecy suggested she was deliberately hiding aspects of her life that might affect her access to Mom's resources. With the guardianship order in hand, I spent the rest of the week working with financial institutions to secure Mom's remaining assets and gather evidence for criminal prosecution. The total amount stolen was even higher than I'd initially calculated. When I included the early retirement account withdrawals, credit card advances, and a home equity loan that Vanessa had somehow convinced Mom to sign, the theft exceeded $85,000. The scope of the financial damage was staggering. Mom's retirement savings had been almost entirely depleted, leaving her dependent on Social Security and a small pension that wouldn't cover her living expenses, let alone potential care costs as her condition worsened. Vanessa had essentially stolen our mother's security and independence, along with her money. Friday afternoon brought unexpected developments. Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit contacted me about the elder abuse report I'd filed earlier in the week. The combination of medical evidence, bank records, and the pattern of suspicious activity had convinced the prosecutor's office to pursue criminal charges against Vanessa. We've been tracking this type of systematic elder abuse more aggressively in recent years, Detective Rodriguez explained during our meeting. Your sister's use of multiple financial institutions and her apparent research into legal vulnerabilities suggests this was a sophisticated operation rather than simple family financial conflict. The detective had already contacted law enforcement in Arizona to locate Vanessa and her husband. Their investigation had revealed that the couple had recently purchased a luxury RV and appeared to be traveling extensively throughout the Southwest. Bank records showed they'd been using Mom's money to fund an elaborate lifestyle that included expensive hotels, restaurants, and recreational activities. The good news is that we've frozen the accounts where the money was transferred, Detective Rodriguez continued. Your sister won't be able to access those funds while the investigation is ongoing. The challenging part will be locating them for arrest and potentially recovering money that's already been spent. The criminal investigation moved forward rapidly once law enforcement became involved. Within a week, authorities had traced Vanessa and David to a luxury resort in Sedona where they'd been staying for several days. The arrest was made without incident, though both suspects initially denied any wrongdoing. Vanessa's phone call from jail was the first direct contact I'd had with her since discovering the theft. Her voice was a mixture of anger, desperation, and the manipulative charm she'd always used to get what she wanted from our family. "Rachel, you have to understand that this is all a misunderstanding," she said, speaking rapidly as if she could overwhelm me with explanations. "Mom offered to help me with David's medical expenses. He has a serious condition that requires expensive treatment, and we didn't know where else to turn. I let her talk for several minutes, documenting everything she said while noting the inconsistencies in her story. The medical emergency had shifted from Vanessa's gynecological surgery to her husband's mysterious condition. The business opportunities she'd described in previous calls were now reframed as desperate attempts to earn money for medical bills. Every explanation contradicted something she'd told Mom or me in recent months. "Mom has Alzheimer's disease, Vanessa," I said finally. "She wasn't capable of making informed decisions about her finances. You took advantage of a vulnerable, elderly woman who trusted you." The silence that followed was longer than any pause in our conversation. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the frantic charm, replaced by cold calculation. "You can't prove I knew anything about her condition," she said. "I'm her daughter, and she wanted to help me. Families help each other, Rachel. You wouldn't understand that because you've always been selfish and judgmental." The call ended with Vanessa demanding that I hire her a lawyer and threatening to expose family secrets that would destroy me if I didn't drop the charges. Her threats only strengthened my resolve to see the legal process through to completion. She'd had months to show concern for Mom's well-being, and instead had chosen to exploit her vulnerability for personal gain. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following month, giving the prosecutor time to build a comprehensive case. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding Mom's financial security and adjusting to our new relationship as guardian and ward. The legal authority to make decisions on her behalf was both empowering and overwhelming. Mom's reaction to the criminal charges against Vanessa was complex and heartbreaking. On good days, she understood that her younger daughter had stolen from her and expressed appropriate anger about the betrayal. On difficult days, she forgot about the theft entirely and worried about why Vanessa hadn't called recently. The inconsistency of her emotional responses made it clear how much her condition had deteriorated. "I don't understand why Vanessa would hurt me," Mom said one afternoon as we worked together in her garden. "I always tried to help her, to support her dreams. Why would she take my money and then disappear?" I struggled to find words that would provide comfort without false hope. "Sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who love them most," I said finally. "It doesn't mean your love was wrong or that you failed as a mother. It means Vanessa made bad decisions that have consequences." The weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing were filled with legal preparation and emotional adjustment. Margaret worked with the prosecutor to ensure Mom's testimony would be handled sensitively, given her cognitive limitations. Dr. Chen provided detailed medical testimony about the timeline of Mom's decline and her diminished capacity for financial decision-making during the period when the thefts occurred. Meanwhile, I worked with a financial planner to maximize Mom's remaining resources and plan for her future care needs. The theft had eliminated most of her savings, but careful budgeting and benefit optimization could still provide a modest lifestyle. We would need to sell the family home eventually and transition Mom to assisted living, but those decisions could wait until her condition required more intensive care. The preliminary hearing itself was surprisingly anticlimactic. Vanessa appeared with a court-appointed attorney, looking smaller and more ordinary than the glamorous, free spirit I remembered. Her husband David sat in the gallery, fidgeting nervously and avoiding eye contact with anyone from our family. The prosecutor presented a straightforward case based on financial records, medical evidence, and testimony from bank officials. The pattern of theft was so clear and well documented that even Vanessa's attorney seemed to recognize the futility of arguing innocence. Instead, he focused on negotiating a plea agreement that would minimize her prison sentence in exchange for cooperation and asset recovery. Mom testified briefly and with dignity, though her confusion was apparent throughout her time on the witness stand. She couldn't remember specific details about the financial transactions, but her obvious cognitive impairment only strengthened the prosecution's case about her vulnerability during the period when the thefts occurred. "I trusted my daughter to help me with things I couldn't understand anymore," Mom said in response to the prosecutor's questions. "I never thought she would take advantage of that trust." Judge Morrison ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on charges of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and theft. Vanessa's bail was set high enough to ensure she couldn't flee again, and the court ordered her to have no contact with Mom or any family members during the legal proceedings. The plea negotiations took several more weeks, during which Vanessa's attorney worked to minimize her exposure, while the prosecutor insisted on substantial restitution and a meaningful prison sentence. Eventually, they reached an agreement that included 18 months in state prison, full restitution of stolen funds, and 5 years of probation with restrictions on accessing elderly individuals' financial accounts. The sentencing hearing provided an opportunity for victim impact statements. I had debated whether to speak, unsure if my words would make any difference in Vanessa's punishment or recovery process. Ultimately, I decided that Mom deserved to have her experience acknowledged publicly, even if she couldn't fully articulate it herself. Elder abuse is one of the cruelest crimes because it targets people at their most vulnerable, I told the court. My sister didn't just steal money from our mother. She stole her sense of security, her trust in family, and her ability to age with dignity. The financial damage can be calculated, but the emotional and psychological damage is immeasurable. I looked directly at Vanessa as I spoke, hoping to see some sign of remorse or understanding. Instead, she stared at the table in front of her, showing no emotion beyond sullen resentment. Her attorney had clearly advised her to express contrition, but her brief statement of apology sounded hollow and scripted. "I'm sorry for the pain I've caused my family," Vanessa said when given the opportunity to address the court. "I was desperate and made poor decisions. I hope someday my mother and sister can forgive me." Judge Morrison sentenced Vanessa to the terms outlined in the plea agreement, emphasizing the seriousness of elder abuse and the court's commitment to protecting vulnerable adults. The restitution order would ensure that most of Mom's stolen money would eventually be recovered, though the process might take months or years depending on asset liquidation. As we left the courthouse after sentencing, I felt a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and exhaustion. Justice had been served, but it couldn't undo the damage that had been done to our family or restore Mom's cognitive abilities. Vanessa would serve her time and hopefully learn from her mistakes, but the trust that had once bound our family together was permanently shattered. The months following Vanessa's sentencing brought unexpected challenges and surprising sources of strength. Mom's condition continued to deteriorate gradually, requiring increasing assistance with daily activities and financial management. However, she also showed remarkable resilience in adapting to her new circumstances and finding joy in simple pleasures. We established new routines that accommodated her limitations while preserving her dignity and independence as much as possible. Sunday dinners at her house became a weekly tradition for Kevin, the kids, and me. Emma and Tyler learned to interact patiently with their grandmother, understanding that her repetitive questions and occasional confusion didn't diminish her love for them. The community response to our situation was overwhelmingly supportive. Neighbors who had known Mom for decades offered practical help with yard work and transportation. The staff at her former library organized a fundraising drive to help offset some of the financial losses. Former students of Dad's reached out to share memories and offer assistance. The network of care that developed around Mom demonstrated the best aspects of human compassion and community solidarity. Recovery of the stolen funds proceeded more slowly than the legal resolution. Vanessa and David had spent approximately $30,000 on their traveling lifestyle, money that couldn't be recovered. However, the remaining funds in frozen accounts were gradually returned to Mom's possession through court order. The luxury RV and other assets were sold to provide additional restitution. Margaret helped me establish more robust financial protections for Mom's restored accounts. We set up a special needs trust that would preserve her assets while allowing her to remain eligible for government benefits as her care needs increased. Multiple safeguards were implemented to prevent future financial exploitation, including mandatory approval from me for any transactions over a predetermined amount. As the one-year anniversary of Vanessa's arrest approached, I received an unexpected letter from her in prison. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. Inside was a handwritten note that was more honest and reflective than anything Vanessa had said during the legal proceedings. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she wrote, "but I need you to know that I understand what I did was wrong. Not just legally wrong, but morally wrong. I convinced myself that Mom's money was going to be mine eventually anyway, so borrowing it early wasn't really stealing. I told myself that her confusion was temporary and that she'd understand once I explained everything. I was lying to myself because I wanted what I wanted, and I didn't care who got hurt." The letter continued for several pages, describing her experiences in prison and her participation in counseling programs for addiction and financial crimes. She acknowledged that her substance abuse problems had influenced her decision-making, though she didn't use that as an excuse for her choices. She expressed genuine remorse for the damage she'd caused and asked for updates about Mom's condition. "I don't expect forgiveness," Vanessa concluded, "and I know I can't undo what I've done. But I want you to know that I think about Mom every day, and I hope she's finding peace despite everything I put her through. I hope someday I can find a way to make amends that goes beyond just paying back money." I shared the letter with Kevin and Margaret, both of whom advised caution about any future contact with Vanessa. The restraining order would remain in effect until her probation was completed. And even then, any relationship would need to be carefully managed to protect Mom from additional stress or confusion. For now, I decided to acknowledge Vanessa's letter without committing to ongoing correspondence. I wrote a brief response letting her know that Mom was receiving good care and that our family was healing from the trauma she'd caused. I didn't offer forgiveness, but I didn't close the door entirely either. Some decisions could wait until time provided better perspective on what would serve everyone's best interests. The second year after Mom's diagnosis brought new challenges as her condition progressed. She required more assistance with personal care and became occasionally agitated when her confusion was particularly severe. We made the difficult decision to transition her to a memory care facility that specialized in Alzheimer's patients, a move that was emotionally wrenching but practically necessary. The facility we chose was bright and welcoming, with staff trained to work compassionately with confused residents. Mom adjusted better than I'd expected, forming friendships with other residents and participating in activities designed to stimulate cognitive function and provide social interaction. Kevin and I visited several times each week, bringing the kids when their school schedules allowed. During one of these visits about 18 months after Vanessa's sentencing, Mom asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Whatever happened to that daughter I used to have?" she said suddenly, looking at me with unusual clarity. "The one who was always traveling and asking for money. I haven't heard from her in such a long time." I wasn't sure how to respond. Mom's awareness of Vanessa's absence suggested she retained more understanding of recent events than I'd realized. I decided to answer honestly but simply. "Vanessa made some bad choices that hurt you," I said. "She's not able to visit right now, but she thinks about you." Mom nodded thoughtfully, seeming to process this information. "I always worried about her," she said finally. "She was so beautiful and charming, but she never seemed to understand that those gifts came with responsibilities. I hope she learns to make better choices." That conversation stayed with me for weeks. Despite everything Vanessa had done, Mom's response was characterized by love and hope, rather than anger or resentment. Her cognitive impairment had stripped away the complex emotions and social expectations that might have shaped a different response, leaving only the fundamental love of a mother for her child. As Vanessa's release date approached, I found myself thinking more frequently about the possibility of reconciliation. Not a return to the naive trust that had enabled the abuse, but perhaps some form of limited relationship that acknowledged both accountability and the possibility of redemption. The decision would ultimately depend on Vanessa's actions after her release, and Mom's capacity to handle contact without distress. 3 years after the theft was discovered, our family had found a new equilibrium. Mom was receiving excellent care in her facility, surrounded by staff who understood her needs and other residents who shared her challenges. Emma and Tyler had matured into thoughtful teenagers who treated their grandmother with patience and affection despite her limitations. Kevin and I had grown closer through navigating this crisis together, our marriage strengthened by shared purpose and mutual support. The financial recovery was nearly complete, with most of the stolen funds returned through restitution payments and asset liquidation. More importantly, we'd developed systems and safeguards that would protect Mom from future exploitation while preserving her remaining autonomy. Margaret continued to monitor the legal aspects of guardianship, ensuring that Mom's rights were respected while her vulnerabilities were addressed. On a warm Saturday afternoon in late spring, I sat with Mom in the garden area of her facility, watching her try to remember the names of flowers she'd grown for decades. Her confusion was apparent, but so was her continued appreciation for beauty and nature. Despite everything she'd lost, her memory, her independence, her financial security, she retained the essential qualities that had always defined her: kindness, curiosity, and an unshakable belief in the fundamental goodness of people. "The flowers are beautiful today," she said, reaching out to touch a rose bloom with gentle fingers. "Someone must take very good care of this garden." "They do," I agreed, thinking about all the people who had contributed to her care and protection over the past few years. "There are many people who want to make sure beautiful things are preserved and protected." As we sat together in the warm sunlight, I reflected on the lessons this ordeal had taught me about family, responsibility, and the different ways we can love and protect each other. Vanessa's betrayal had shattered my assumptions about unconditional family loyalty, but it had also revealed the strength and resilience that emerge when people face challenges with courage and integrity. The anonymous threatening text I'd received years earlier had warned me that I would regret interfering in family business. The sender was wrong. I regretted many things about our situation: the years of enabling that had made the abuse possible, the signs I'd missed or rationalized, the pain Mom had endured, but I didn't regret protecting her when protection was needed most. The real regret would have been staying silent while a vulnerable person suffered exploitation. The real regret would have been choosing false peace over difficult truth. The real regret would have been failing to use whatever power and resources I had to defend someone who could no longer defend herself. As the afternoon sun began to set, I helped Mom back to her room, where dinner and evening activities awaited. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as her condition continued to progress, but it would also bring new opportunities to demonstrate love through actions rather than just words. The family we'd built around her care, biological and chosen, would continue to provide the security and dignity she deserved. Walking to my car in the facility's parking lot, I thought about the contrast between the family I'd grown up believing in and the family I'd learned to create through conscious choice and commitment. Blood relationships couldn't guarantee loyalty or protection, but chosen relationships built on shared values and mutual respect could provide something even more precious: the knowledge that love expresses itself through service, sacrifice, and the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.